Well, let us get our December event kicked off. Before we get over to Dave Rohrer for this month's presentation on Webmaster tools, I want to just do a little bit of housekeeping. This is our final virtual 2020. I want to thank everyone for attending, as many as you have, both with Engage and our monthly events. Obviously, this is not the way we had hoped to execute our events this year and our ongoing education, but hope springs eternal, and we're here nonetheless trying to provide as many virtual opportunities for people to meet, to learn, and then we can continue to keep the SEMpdx collective together. Again, if you didn't hear our announcements, we have moved to a free membership model for SEMpdx for the next year. So between now and August of 2021, we do have free memberships. Just go to SEMpdx.org/membership, or just go to our homepage where you can navigate from there. Sign up for our free memberships. This is a way of keeping in touch with everyone, getting all the membership benefits, getting over to our group Slack channel where we have discussions about SEO, SEM, and just times that we can have throughout. We are setting into place our panel for January 2021. This is very similar to the panels we've run in the past, albeit that it's still going to be virtual. We'll be making some changes to our Zoom operations in order to facilitate that panel, make sure we can have a Q&A, have that discussion, get it recorded, and we'll be broadcasting that out far and wide, as well as we're about to drop our announcements around our next year's Charity of Choice and our new lineup of virtual events that will be happening in Q1 into Q2 of next year. Obviously, SEMpdx, myself and the board included, have been obviously monitoring the news, and assume as everyone else has, and staying in touch with state and local officials as to what events happen, how large can they be, where can they be held at, what can happen during those times. Obviously, we're still probably a few months away from meeting together once again in person, but in the meantime, we'll keep our virtual events rolling. We're opening up our membership, and we're beginning our plans for Engage 2021. Keep your ears out for announcements around that. But without any further ado, I'm proud to announce today that Dave Rohrer, the founder and CEO of NorthSide Metrics, he's going to do a presentation on getting the most value out of your Webmaster tools, both from Google, from Bing, on and down the line. Dave, you have the floor, you have the presentation, you can share your screen, and we'll get it kicked off. He has a couple different sections that he's going to be breaking out. We'll be doing a Q&A in between those sections. Keep your questions in the chat. We'll be asking them throughout, and then we can get those, everyone, a great presentation. But Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. Can everyone hear me? I hope so.
Coming through great.
Where is that going to work? These are handy, except when they don't work. I have a standing desk and I prefer to stand, but it doesn't want to. Of course not. It was working earlier. There we go. So this is going to start off a little basic, and then it'll go to a little technical, a little bit around tools, a little around Google, some cool things that have come out from Bing. And then the very end, if there's any people that love giving work to their developers or have developers that are perhaps bored and looking for projects, I have all sorts of ideas that you can use to leverage Google Search Console API and maybe go into 2021 with a cool in-house tool built. And then you don't need to rely on, Google Keyword Tool and some other things as much maybe as you do. So I'm going to break it up in a couple of different sections. Hopefully, if you have questions, and of course, the whole group of people just went away. But Robert, if you see anyone with a question, just go ahead and stop me. That's no problem. I'd rather answer questions when you think of them than 5 minutes later after you forget. So hello, 2021. I know we're all slightly looking forward to it. And this year, Google and Bing have both been busy. Bing has been very, very busy talking about some of the things they've done. And so hopefully some of these tools, even if you're on the paid side, like Robert, you said you're on the paid side, there are gold in the data here, especially as Google starts to take your data away. Welcome to the party. You're 7-8 years late. They've been taking away our keyword data for a while. So Quick, what we're going to talk about, just the new tools, how to export it, reporting. No one likes to do reports. If we can always make them easier, better, faster, everyone loves that. And then kind of what to focus on. There's a lot of stuff, Robert and I were talking right before, there's a lot of data in Google Search Console. Even I, as an SEO who's in there daily, doesn't look at a lot of it. So Bing, yes, I'm going to talk about Bing, because why not? I do have a podcast. We actually had Fabrice on earlier this year, the week they launched a bunch of stuff, including the Bing WordPress plugin. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But Bing actually retooled, overhauled completely their Webmaster tools. And on a daily basis, every time I work with a new client, I'm going to guess 5% maybe have it installed. I'm going to guess, this is a more technical group, so I'm going to guess maybe 20%. Just most people do not install Bing Webmaster. It's free. They give you a ton of data. And if you've ever hesitated and are one of those people that do not have it installed, hopefully these next couple of slides will convince you. It's very easy. If you have Google Search Console set up, they've actually made it so that you can really just import stuff. You don't have to verify it. There's really no other, you can update and do the DNS and do those other ways, the meta tag, uploading a file. You can do that, but you don't have to now. They're making it even easier. So, just like with Google's paid, or I'm sorry, with Bing's paid, you can upload Google stuff. Now they're making it so that if you have a Google Search Console, you can easily get Bing Webmaster going. So one of the tools, when I remember walking through all of the changes and all of the stuff when it first rolled out with Fabrice, this is the one thing that jumped out at me. You can now get competitor link data. So I love Majestic, I love Ahrefs, I love SEMrush. Those are all great tools. That said, not everyone can afford them. And sometimes I just like a third-party data point beyond them. And this is actually the data that Bing has. So you can drop in your site and it'll compare it. So Greg Finn, great podcast if you are into podcasts. Hello, Kat. This is my podcast, The Business of Digital. So I compared ours to theirs because we both have standalone websites, and my cat decided to join us. So it's free anchor text, free data, everything you need right there, and it's free. And doesn't have to be a competitor for you specifically, can be one of your clients, but free link building, the free link audit data. They have a URL submission now. So if you're having problems getting pages indexed, or you have, you're late to the game with a product or a sale page, and you want to make sure that it's up there, Bing has this now where you can quickly submit it. They just added it recently. They even have a plugin. And I actually have this plugin set up on the podcast. And so that's what the data you see there. I just grabbed a screenshot from the other day. You can get 10 a day through this, and you can get, what is it? I think it is only 10 a day. I think it was more, and then they reduced it. But if you install this plugin, it automatically pings it. So you don't even have to wait for them to crawl your sitemap. You don't have to wait for them to crawl your page, your site, nothing. As soon as you add a new page or update one, because you can manually update it, there's a typo on it, if legal says you need to fix something, or something goes up and wrong in a migration, you can kind of go in and try to fix that quicker. Keyword research. They have taken it to an interesting level where you can do keyword research in there, and then it ties into, just like it used to in the past, but it's really clean, really nice. It ties into, being paid. But, Google Search Console, you can only look at what keywords you are ranking for. There's a little bit more here. And they have a couple other little tools. Again, if you are looking for something just quick and dirty to scan your site, yes, I love Sitebulb and Screaming Frog, and there's a lot of other great tools. This will actually just crawl your site for you, and then it'll just email you. You can do just the sitemap. If you update your sitemap, if you're someone like I have sometimes WordPress clients that always have the wrong sitemaps, or they just don't update them, or they break it, I can crawl that and don't even have to use Screaming Frog. I can just crawl it, update it, and make sure, let them know about it. And then this is what it looks like. It just tells me that I certainly don't pay enough attention to my own podcast site, which I already know. We all, cobbler's kids don't really get brand new shoes very often. But, took it 4 or 5 minutes just to do, a quick 20-page scan. And then it emailed me and they gave me all the info I needed. So it's just a free, handy little tool. Microsoft Clarity. I don't know if anyone is using this. I thought I would talk about it because it is free. And I also realized at the time that one of my sites, the one that I set up on here, actually doesn't have Bing Webmaster set up. So I can confirm to you that if you don't even have to have Bing Webmaster set up to use Microsoft Clarity. And so what is Microsoft Clarity? It's basically like a Hotjar type of heat map system. It'll record everything your users do. So here was someone the other day. I was suspect to a lead form fill out on my website. So I went into here and lo and behold, there it is. They did actually spend 2 minutes and I was able to watch them navigate the site. And to me, kind of validated that the person that reached out to me probably wasn't just, a form filling spammer. And that they were actually, a real person kind of doing stuff. So just a ton of data here. If you've never installed Hotjar or never been able to get budget or have a small site, you can easily drop this on it. Or if you have a landing page and you just want to get quick data. I went through Google Tag Manager. I simply just added the code there and it instantly started recording. And about 4 hours later, I had 1 or 2 people go and test it, just clicking around on the site, knowing where they're from. I went from my IP address and all of the recordings were there. And it was all there within a couple hours. So if you want to test how people use certain things, if you're like me and you have to argue with clients sometimes to get them to take away those sliders on the homepage that we all don't like, but sometimes someone does, this could be something that you easily drop on the homepage just for a week. And, if you're worried about site speed, you can really just a couple days maybe and get some data and show them that no one uses this page the way you think it does. It does have heat maps. And again, this is free. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't remember how many page views you get. My site doesn't get a ton, so I'm certainly not going to run up against that. But, it's free. And, I have some great data here. And if I ever have clients where I'm arguing with or we're debating about something, for me, this is a great tool just to have, if I have access to Google Tag Manager, again, I can just go and drop it. It takes 3 minutes and it's live. And then here's just the code, and it actually integrates with Google Analytics, and the tracking code is really small, really simple, and that's all it is. So is there any questions on Bing, on why I just spent like 10 minutes talking about Bing? I know no one does usually.
It doesn't seem like we have any questions at this time, but we'll keep rolling. I'll keep the eyes out on the chat. If you do have any questions throughout the presentation, be sure to drop them in the chat. We'll get them to Dave throughout the presentation.
So Search Console. This was started some years ago. There was a new version in 2018, and then Google decided to make big changes this year. First thing is my habit is I would always type in Webmasters. I called out Google on Twitter about this, and they didn't really do anything. But in the past, if you went to google.com/webmasters, you click on something, it would redirect you. And that now goes to developers.google.com/search. So come here, hit Search Console, sign in, get there. Now it takes you to here. I just wanted to point out to Google, you kind of messed up your SEO and user experience a little bit there. So if you click Get Started, that takes you to here. Do not do that. So if you're new and wondering why some of us are upset when Google does certain things, this is what they do. Where you really want to go is a very handy short URL, search.google.com/search-console. Just rolls right off the tongue. So that is where the new Google Search Console is. And I kind of alluded to this earlier, Robert, but we've been losing not provided data for many years. So if you do not have Google Search Console set up, please, please, please do it. The best two sources of data and keyword data that you can get, are actually three, would be the search term report from your paid accounts, what people search into your toolbar or your site search, and your Google Search Console data. Those are my three favorite places to get an understanding of how people are finding the site and keywords that people are using, at least from my own personal client, like my own sites. And then this year, on top of it, paid people are probably going to start being a little bit curious because, I drop a link in here. Will Reynolds and Sear Interactive did a study, and a bunch of others have done studies recently about the 15% up to 30% of paid data that is kind of evaporating. You don't know what keywords are driving traffic, clicks, or anything. So, and conversions even. So, if you're always looking for an excuse to try to fight it, it's just another great source for data. And then one big thing is if you're ever comparing pages and queries, just know that Google has and will continue to take away some query data. So this is for the same time frame, the same everything. You see the 5 clicks at the top, 177 impressions. One is the queries report, one is the pages report. It's just like Google Analytics where someone says, in Google Analytics, it shows me this number, and in Google Search Console, it shows me this number. Or if there's ranking questions and it says, my Google Search Console says that my ranking is X, but your third-party tool that you report on every month says this, or your internal, someone says, hey, I went home and I checked it. They're all pulling from different places, but also this specifically, it's just not the same data. Google is also taking out some query data, some click data under the reasoning of privacy. If it is a low search term and results in some clicks, you'll see it on the page level, like you'll see all 5 pages or 5 clicks. But for the certain queries, if it's a really small number under privacy, they're not showing it to you. So just know that even here, you're not getting all of your data, but it is great indicating data as far as I'm concerned for what is working or not working on your site. And then with the update this year, Google's just, taken a lot of stuff away and broken some stuff, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But they've also given us some new stuff. So like Speed Experimental is now Core Web Vitals, which most people know is coming in May. I was probably working on that over Q4 and Q1. So instead of Speed, that is going away and being deprecated, and now Core Web Vitals is here. But there are still some legacy tools, at least for now. You can still get to crawl stats, and you can still get to some of that. URL parameters, I actually used that since they came out with this for a client who had weird HubSpot URLs being generated. And luckily it still works. I'm gonna be very sad when they take that away, because that's a really easy way to help work with Google to understand what it should understand, and that, these URL parameters you keep creating are not really new pages. There was like 50,000 of them for a page or a site that has, 800 pages really. So verification, Bing is very simple if you get Google Search Console set up, but you can do it at the domain level. So if you have lots of subdomains, if you have HTTP, HTTPS, I highly, highly, highly recommend setting up domain. Most people do not, because you have to do it at the DNS. But if you can, it's best to set it up at that level. You get lots of data. You can cover everything. Most likely you're going to set it up at the URL prefix if you have not. Most times it's just easier. I kind of rank these based on how easy technically it is. The HTML file is really easy. Problem is, most of us probably know, after migration from dev to staging to prod, at some point you overwrite that HTML file because it wasn't in that package. So then you lose your ability to be owner. So that is the one problem with the HTML file. The HTML tag is very simple, but it can also be deleted as well. If you use Yoast or Rank Math or some other, a lot of themes actually have it built in. What if you update your theme to a new theme and you don't move it over? You can, again, lose it. Google Analytics is my preferred way. If I have access to Google Analytics, you're not usually getting booted. It's easiest to then dole out additional access, but if you're not admin, it can be a pain in the butt. And Google Tag Manager is also very difficult. I can see it accidentally getting deleted, but it should not require dev, so it's a little bit more secure way, and also harder to accidentally delete. And then just domain name DNS. Unless you're a small company, you have access to your domain stuff. It can be a bit difficult and challenging from security and just getting tech to sign off on something like that. So there's a bunch of other really deep dive into it. Google actually has a really great series that walks through each of these specifically. So if you ever have a client or internal developer and you ask them to do it and they're like, well, how do I do it? Their Google or the YouTube channel is actually really, really great for that. So here's some new stuff that's been coming out. The enhancements to Core Web Vitals. You'll tend to see this is a site that is not so fast with some interesting kind of art going on with the desktop. I'm not sure what they did. I'd have to go back and look, but at some point we went from really good to not so good and then back and then weird designs. But there is a ton of data there, and leading into, again, May, probably want to start looking at this report a little bit more. There is a similar report about page speed in your Google Analytics, but this gives you a little bit more detail. It does use Lighthouse. So speed, not the movie. Just digging in as much as you can and looking is really what you need to be doing. It will break out your slow pages and then start to tell you where it is and where it is. And then what was it? Mobile usability is another report. There's just lots of reports. You usually can look at some of these pages. It doesn't tell you anything you don't know, but every so often, clients do make changes, product teams do make changes, developers make changes to pages that aren't asked. I tend to like to look in here at least every week or every month for depending on if it's my site or a client site. I try to look every so often and just go through some of these reports, even if I don't look at them on a regular basis. Unparsable data structure is an interesting one. You probably won't see it, but it is a new one. I look through, I have access to 25 accounts or so. There's only 2 where I could find an example of this. And this is one of them where there's literally none. It's like at some point recently it had 1 page or 2 page where it had weird structured data issues, but unless you're working with a lot of e-commerce or local where you've got a lot of structured data and a lot of schema stuff going on, you probably aren't going to see this. But it's really hard to find examples. Same thing with the logos. 25 clients plus accounts or so, and it's just very rarely shows up. So like I said, there's a lot of great reports in there that you probably won't ever need, but when you do need them, just familiarize yourself with them a little bit every so often, just so that you can leverage them as needed. So the performance used to be called performance, and now we have search results and we have discover. This is probably where I spend most of my time looking at the search results, and you'll notice that there is average position for search results. There is not for Discover because of the way Discover works. And if you have lots of questions about Discover and how it works, it uses AMP, but there is a link there and Google kind of breaks it down. If you have a news type site, you probably worry about Discover and look at Discover. Most small businesses and SaaS companies and even e-commerce that I work with, we never see that show up, maybe every so often. So performance, there's a bunch of ways to different export. Just remember, you can only get 16 months worth of data. So if you're looking at year over year, I highly, highly suggest you go through and start getting your data for January of this year, and so on, because come end of Q1 next year, you're going to forget or realize that you can't do year over year, and you're going to miss out. The URL inspection tool is a great little tool, one of the better ones within Google Search Console. If you have not used it, I highly recommend taking a look at it. If you ever a page that's not ranking really well, or if something is just jumping out at you weird, come here, just drop the URL in there, and you can inspect it. And if that comes up, and it tells you all the different things. Is it indexed? Is it having problems? Is it in the sitemap? Is it page friendly? And then it actually gives you the code. So days gone by, along with this, there used to be a way to index it. So Bing just rolled out the ability to submit 10 URLs. In October, there was a problem of some sort, according to Google, and it's been gone. So this is what it used to look like, and you could index it, and you could update it. I use that for some of my clients. Sometimes we updated page titles, we updated meta descriptions. There was something legally wrong again. We looked at it. We wanted to make sure we got it fixed in the SERPs as quickly as possible. As of today, we're going on day 55, and this actually was something I just added this morning. Thank you, Barry, for pointing out that it's been 55 days, that it does not work. So if you're trying to fix any pricing or trying to fix anything in the Google right now, with the holiday season, it would have been nice, but instead it is not working just yet. So hopefully they will fix that soon, at least to some extent, so that if we ever need it, you can hopefully use it. Technical data. Is there any questions? All the good stuff's really coming up, I know.
It doesn't look like we have any questions.
No worries.
But again, everyone, if you have any questions, get them into the chat tool. It's at the bottom of the toolbar there, and we'll get them answered throughout the call. Thank you, Dave.
No problem. So So the technical data, the coverage data. So when does this stuff really come in handy? If you are moving to a new subdomain, if you've not moved to secure versus secure, if you're moving from WordPress to WordPress, WordPress to Drupal, any of these other reasons, a site migration and update, if you're updating your theme, you need to be looking at the technical data we're going to look at. I highly suggest looking at it, at least, like I said, if not weekly, monthly, or at least doing a quarterly look to see, is there a spike in 404s? Is there a spike in different things? Google Core Update just rolled out. You could be looking to see, okay, has there been technical issues leading up to this? If you did see a drop or a pop, which keywords in the part we were just looking at have popped or dropped? That kind of data is great if you're not using it already. Content audit. All of this stuff combined with log files to understand how Google and Bing are digging into your site. And a lot of this technical data is also available in Bing. I just didn't think anyone would want me to cover it twice, let alone once, maybe. If you're moving from a subdomain to a folder or a folder to a subdomain, you can set up those subdomains and track them as well. If you're curious how many, I know some people that have thousands of Google Search Consoles set up for one email address because of a site. And I didn't talk about it, but you can set it up for a folder. So I've had clients where we've had really, really popular or really, really important pages. We would literally set up a Google Search Console just for that page or just for that folder. So if you want to be able to break out your blog content or articles or just service pages or quote page or sort of offer page, you can break that up into its own Google Search Console and then give access for that one to a product manager or someone in a business unit or a developer even. Like, you know what, we're having problems with this section. I just created something for you. Here's access. Here's everything you need. Go take a look at it. Sitemaps are great. Google, for some reason, never forgets. You've had a sitemap 40 years ago, and it's a video sitemap, and I know exactly which site this is. We've not had that sitemap on. I've worked on that site on and off for 10 plus years. There's not been a video sitemap there for years. That 2018 is wrong. It's not been there for at least 5 or 6 years, but yet it still remembers it. It'll just tell you what's going on. You know, why are you having errors in your sitemap? It should be, your sitemap should be, you know, only the pages that are live. A lot of times I'll also see excluded. The biggest reason you'll see that is because you're actually blocking that page with robots. Someone's either turned it on in a plugin with Yoast, where somewhere in your code, if you're not on WordPress, maybe developers pushed your staging site live and there's in the robots.txt, got pushed up. When you see that excluded start to go up in the errors, that's a huge telltale for me. There it is. The marked no index often comes up. There's a huge list of errors. I'm not going to go into all of them. I have a couple slides here, but ROI Revolution does a huge dive into just the extensively long list that there can be. Most often you'll see 301, 404, something marked no index, blocked by robots. Soft 404s is another one that often. We lost Robert for a moment. A bunch of different errors. You know, with everything, I always look at them, and sometimes it's not important to fix all of them, but you know, for a healthy site, it is good to watch them. Valid makes sense. You know what's good. The excluded. Anytime you block something, redirects, site migration, all of these things are going to pop up. If you're doing any of those things over now in the holidays, or you know, even into Q1, have this set up, have access to your log files. Between this and your log files are the two most important things I would say of watching with a site migration, or even a new theme, making sure that you have access to both of them. It's just all the data you could need to help you, if needed, hopefully not, you know, dig into what went wrong, why rankings are dropping more than you thought, why they're popping, is Google actually crawling pages? And here's just like a little bit of a list of for sometimes you'll see on a site. See excluded. The one thing about excluded you'll start to see in this, you know, this is me in my own my own shoes, currently not indexed. For some reason, I didn't take out the feed your link in at the time. I took that out a couple months ago now after I saw this. But Google was finding in every WordPress page a link to the feed for every single page. And it, you know, it knew about how many? 200 on a site that at the time probably had 150 pages or so. So there's all sorts of weird things. And sometimes pages with redirects. It's great to find things that you and I and a normal user would never find. Google is great at, I always say it's really like water. You can build a dam with no follows and robots.txt and, you know, with trying to hide links. It's water. It always finds a way, and it finds a way to get to pages that really shouldn't even exist, like these. I don't know where any of these URLs came from. They've never been created, yet Google found them all, and it continues to crawl them. So take a look at that, you know, once a month or so, dig into it. You're going to find weird, random gold of stuff wrong with your site that really shouldn't be, but Google's finding a way to get to those URLs. So one of the things I didn't talk about yet is Google Search Console. Another reason to possibly set up multiple accounts for a site is if you are the person that typically goes in there and you have hundreds and hundreds of long tail keywords driving traffic to a page, Google Search Console will limit you at 1,000. So even if 5,000 keywords are driving traffic to that page, you can only know about 1,000. Depending on the report, it only gives you 1,000 rows. The exports of page and query data are separate, and there's access and there's different things. The biggest thing around the Google Search Console API is if you have a really big, complicated site and you don't work with an easy, I once spent almost a year trying to get a sitemap made by one of the client's bad developers, and it was crazy. But you can use the sitemap API access. There's no output for the technical issue stuff, but what I typically use it for, and I'll talk about some tools that use it, is I can get per month or per day. If we saw a spike on a certain day, or maybe even Black Friday, if you're an e-commerce site, you could get for a certain product, it went big, 5,000 rows. You can get that from the API through certain tools, but you can't get it through Google Search Console. So anytime I'm doing a big content audit or big keyword research project, I prefer for most certainly try to use a tool that uses the API. There's just so much more data. And if you want to get an idea, there's a link here, but it just kind of shows you what the API is. And again, if you have developers, you can do this, but don't worry about it. I will also talk through a bunch of tools that use this and make it much easier for you. So tools for analysis. If you use any of these tools, double check that you have the connections set up. Screaming Frog, I use a lot. It can bring in Google Search Console data, and it can also bring in Google Analytics data. So if you're doing a content audit, this is one of my favorite things to do, is to crawl the site and make sure that I bring in, the Google Analytics and the Google Search Console data. You can bring in the clicks, impressions, CTR, and position for all those keywords. And you can also select the time in this for the date range. And if you're in multi-countries, say Canada and US, you could also then set just Canada or just US as well, if you have the same site. Deep Crawl also does it, and they have directions on it. You can include queries if you want to make sure, if you want to say, hey, I don't want any branded queries for these terms or for these pages. I only want to know blah, blah, blah. This is another place to do it. Which one was it? Oh, SiteBulb, another crawler that will let you do it. And I believe it also brings in Google Analytics data. There it is. Yep. OnCrawl is another great tool. And, depending on what you use, they're all available. But any of these tools you should, if you are using them, and I believe even if you use the free small version of Screaming Frog, you can connect to Google Search Console, I believe. And then reporting tools. So these are different tools that I use for either one-off reporting, monthly reporting, per project. If I have a keyword research project or some sort of technical content audit, or if I'm just trying to familiarize myself with a new client. If you have a lot of monthly reporting, looking at some of these tools, even if you don't have a lot of budget, some of them are actually fairly cheap. And if you look at how long it takes you to pull various pieces of data, or, versus how long and how quickly some of these tools can save you time, you might be able to make the case either internally or to, someone that is denying the budget. But this is Analytics Edge. Up until about 2 months ago, this was my go-to. I'm trying a different tool right now, but this one will connect to everything you see right here, including being Webmaster Tools, Moz, and a couple others. But it's a free version, connects to Google Analytics, but has some limits. It's $99 if you want to be able to automate things, if you wanted to be able to remember and do a little bit more stuff. And then for each of these add-ins, as it calls it, it's $50. But for me, it's $150 for me to have the tool and Google Search Console. I can set it in one time to go get the 5,000 rows from this site by week or by day or by month for the entire 2020. And within 4 minutes or 5 minutes, it'll grab it all and output it all for me. And I have all of that data right there in 5 or 10 minutes. So for me, the time savings is just ridiculous from something like that. And I've also used it a lot for Google Analytics, just pulling data for reports on a monthly basis. I just keep using it. And it just saves me a ton of time when I was doing a lot of reporting for some of my clients. And even in-house, it'll save you a ton of time. There's also, I'm not a huge fan of Google Sheets just because it's slow. but it is handy for a lot of things. And this is actually a free tool that ties into it. So search analytics for sheets.com is a great little tool. So Google Search Console is free. This is free. If you want to just pull some quick data, one off, this is actually a great tool. And you can just kind of see what it's doing right there. It set the date. So if you wanted to do, if you were curious, if you did see a pop or a drop by the most recent update, pick 2 weeks before the pop, 2 weeks after, and you can probably get that data in less than 5 minutes. And it's all right here through the free tools. So I have used that one. It is very handy. I've used this tool in the past. Most SEOs probably have, but I wanted to restart using it again just because it has so many connectors and just so I could speak to it, whether I like it or not. So this is SEO Tools for Excel. I believe it works for Mac. I'm a Windows user, but I also believe it does work for Mac. Don't quote me on that. If you have, maybe probably look it up on the website just to double check. But for me, it does work well. It ties into Majestic, SEMrush. You can see all the different connectors it has there. It's a little bit more expensive right out the bat, but I don't believe I had to pay too much more, really. The only thing that I don't like, and it might be just because I've just started using it again the last month, is I haven't quite figured out how to get it to get the same monthly kind of output really quickly that I could in the other tool. And that I don't know if it doesn't do it or if it's just the user error. I'm still working that out. I've only used it a couple times. So, but again, this ties into to Excel for me. It's got tons of access, and there's some other tools on it where I just used it the other day. One of my clients asked me to look at these 10 pages real quick. I could have fired up Screaming Frog and I could have done, something like that to pull the page title and everything. It actually was quicker to just pop open Excel, use this because there's up at the top here, you'll see there's this thing called On Page. And I can just drop it in there and tell it to grab page title, H1, meta description, a couple other things. And it grabbed it by the time Screaming Frog would have even opened. So there's a lot of great uses for this. But since we're just talking Search Console, I'm just focusing on that one. But it's 99 euros as far as I am, if I remember correctly. Yes, notes say 99 euros a year. So whatever the exchange rate is that day. Supermetrics, if you've never used it, it's great. It's also not cheap. So, but it can create awesome dashboards. It can grab a lot of that data for you and let you customize it. Windsor.ai and Funnel.io are not cheap, and they do a lot of different things. So if you're really looking for a really robust dashboard of some sort, these would probably be it. Windsor.ai has a free basic level, but then it jumps to $99 and goes up from there. Funnel.io is 500 data sources, but then it's $500 a month, and based on how much you spend. So you probably need an entire team to really care about that. Data Studio. If you are looking for reports and you want to be able to give a report to someone internally that they actually would care about, and you can customize it without giving them access to Google Analytics, Data Studio can be set up to talk to your Google Search Console. So you could set the dates and you could bring it in and just give, whoever that person is internally, what data they need, and it's right there. And this is actually a free template created by Google in Data Studio. So, right now, if you wanted, you could probably fire this up and have this done and rolling within the next 15 minutes or later today if you want. But I have used this and I've worked with some agencies where they actually had custom ones that they built, and they actually used Google Analytics would tie in, Google Search Console would tie in, and then we bring in additional data from other places, from Sheets as sources, and that's what they were using for reporting. It's a little clunky sometimes, but it's also great because you were able to then easily update it going backwards. Power BI is a great tool as well. It does tie in, and you can bring data in. I've actually started to use Power BI a lot over the last couple of years. Probably not as much as I would like to this year, but I have used it. And it's free from Microsoft. So at least to a certain extent, it's free. And it can bring in tons of data. And it's also great for mashing up Google Search Console data with paid data is what I use a lot for. And I've also used Watson, which I don't list here, but I've also used Watson for something similar. Just bringing in all that data and smashing it together. Tableau actually has a way and a report, and there's a link here where you can easily bring in your Google Search Console data into Tableau and really dig into it and have fun. And if you are working at a company that's really focused on, most are, but sales leads, you can apply that data over some of the data you see here and really kind of dig into it. Where'd my, oh. And what's an hour? So there's a question. If you were a small business owner and only had an hour or two per week to check your Google My Business dashboard, Google Analytics, Google Search Console, what metrics would you want to look at in Google Search Console? For Google Search Console, I would look at the number of pages that are errors in the technical side. And then from the search side, I would just take a look at create a report or two that saves some of the pages you really care about. I could go back a ways. Oh, it's way back there. Figure out what the URL is for looking at a certain page in the performance report, and then save it. Save it in an Excel, save it in your bookmarks, and then just quickly go there and look. Because what you can do is you can set it to either compare the last 2 weeks or the last 30 days, or just show me the last 16 months at any time, and just take a look and say, okay, this is my most important page. Are we getting more traffic? Are the rankings up or down? Which keywords are driving traffic? Do I care about those? And for me, that would be those two reports, just to make sure technically your site is healthy. Just looking for spikes and errors, and there's always little things going on. But if you know you didn't do anything dev wise in the last 2 weeks, and you're seeing crazy spikes in pages not found or 301s, there's something wrong. Either Google found something wrong or something broke and you don't know. A plugin was updated, a theme was updated, something broke. And just to try to, not wait 3 weeks later and realize that, we've had some serious, I'm working with one client right now where they got hacked, and we started to see weird stuff spiking, and then we started to investigate it. That looking at that data sent us down the rabbit hole that made us question why there was these weird things. And then we noticed weird keywords ranking in the performance, which then sent us down another rabbit hole to go, where is this coming from? What is causing it? Oh, look, there's weird stuff that is hiding in the footer that's hacked, that's only on some pages. And so by just paying attention to it, we just happened to stumble upon it. And otherwise we probably no one would have noticed until it was too late. So hopefully that answers that. And the other thing about some of these tools is if you do export the data every month, so for some of my clients on the monthly report, I go in and for some of the important pages, I just spend 5 minutes and I export all of the keywords for that page, for that month that drove traffic. So if there's ever any questions about some of the really important pages, we have the Google Analytics that goes backwards, and we have monthly data for the really important pages. So we can go, hey, in October, a lot of leads came in and now they're all closing, but we're not quite sure why. Well, let's take a look at those key pages and see, okay, well, traffic was all the same. Oh, we actually had a lot more traffic for this certain type of keyword than we did previously or after. There might not be enough for your Google Analytics to flag you or for anything else to really raise an awareness and say, hey, you've got keywords that are really performing well and some aren't, but you can go back and at least look at that data. And then custom tools. There are lots of custom tools if you have developers or if you're just curious. I've gotten into data science a bit more the last couple of years. This is Python, so this gets very technical. I won't spend too much time here, but there is a ton of free tools out there. Thank you to people like Paul and others that they've been creating custom tools that leverage Python, Tableau, log files, all sorts of stuff to extract the data from Google Search Console. And in some cases, there's people that are combining multiple sources into their own report. So this is a huge long list of a bunch of different free tools. Some of them are plug and play. Some of them are much more difficult. There's also someone that talks about using Google BigQuery to store all of your data. So again, you know, like the Google Search Console for Python, Search Console 0.0.
Dave, did we lose you? Give it a few seconds to see if we can recover here. In the meantime, I'll remind everyone that we have some additional virtual events coming up in January and a whole new line coming in next year. And it appears we've lost Dave. Well, that's part of the nature of the virtual events. Thankfully, we only had 4 minutes left. Unfortunately, he's not going to be around to see it, but I want to extend a special thank you to Dave Rohrer for joining us today and covering off on all those topics. We will be passing along a recording of this event as well as his contact information if you have questions thereafter. Again, my name is Garrett Brown. I'm the president of SEMpdx. I invite everyone who joined us today to go to SEMpdx.org and sign up for a free membership. That is an offer extended between now and August of next year. We have events coming up in January of next year, as well as a whole line of events. And then, of course, Engage 2021. The board and I will be meeting on that here soon, and we'll have updates around that. Oh, Dave, you rejoined us. Looks like we had lost you there for a moment, but we were getting close to time anyways. So I wanted to extend a special thank you from the SEMpdx board and everyone in attendance for your time today. Really appreciate your slides and your information. And then, of course, we have you on Twitter now. So if anyone has a special question after the presentation, but thank you for your time today. Again, Dave, the nature of virtual events, it was bound to happen.
I'm stealing my neighbor's Wi-Fi. Works out. Yeah, I totally just dropped completely. I'm like, well, that was awesome.
I gave it a second. Like maybe it's just a frozen thing. Maybe
Nope.
It's
Totally just lost my internet. My router just crap.
But it's thankfully it was in the final 4 minutes of the presentation and not 4 minutes into the presentation. So we got the width and breadth. But thank you again, and thanks for everyone in attendance. Again, the recording after this, and stay tuned for updates on our January and subsequent events. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you all.